Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are getting into a historical maneuver that really did rewire the entire geopolitical globe.
It's a huge one.
It really is. We're talking about the moment the British Empire, a nation sitting on top of, the world's best coal reserves, made this deliberate, almost terrifying choice
To abandon it.
to abandon coal and bet its entire future and the Royal Navy's future on oil. And what's so fascinating looking at the sources is that this massive shift, it didn't start in Parliament, not in some secure room.
No.
It began in a spa, a place people go to recover from a crisis.
Yeah.
So today we're dissecting how, personal desperation and this looming geopolitical fear just collided.
Right. And our mission here is to go beyond just the story, the anecdote, and really extract the strategic principles. We want to look at decision-making under, existential uncertainty.
That's a good way to put it.
And also the psychology of fear as a motivator and just how critical timing is. These are lessons that, while they're rooted in this old naval race, they're really blueprints for managing big shifts today.
It's a true paradox, isn't it? Why would the most powerful nation on Earth trade a safe, domestic resource coal for something as volatile and distant as Persian oil? The documents literally call it a step into a sea of trouble.
So where do you begin with a decision like that?
Exactly.
You have to begin where history so often turns at the moment of maximum stress, where private pain intersects with public need.
Which brings us right to Marienbad Spa, 1912, and this collision of two very frustrated men.
On one side, you have William Knox Darcy. He's there for his health, sure, but mostly he's there to escape his great Persian oil project.
Yeah.
And he was just bleeding money.
All total financial hemorrhage.
Totally. He was under so much strain just trying to keep the Anglo-Persian oil company afloat. The man was tired, he was broke, and he was honestly right on the edge of just calling it quits.
And then at the very same resort, you've got Admiral John Jackie Fisher, a real visionary, the guy pushing to modernize the Royal Navy, but he's dealing with his own public humiliation.
A very public one. It happened on the HMS Hannibal. He had championed this idea that oil was the future, but the tech just wasn't there yet. The burners were crude.
And they failed spectacularly.
They did. Burner broke. The ship was covered in this thick black smoke. And it basically just proves all the conservative, coal-loving admirals right. The whole thing was a PR disaster.
So the establishment just pounced on it. See, this fancy future stuff doesn't work. Let's stick with what we know.
Exactly. That failure was all the proof they needed to, maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
But for Fisher, it just reinforced his golden rule.
Which was?
Never, ever let yourself be left behind technologically. For him, safety wasn't about having coal and whales. Safety was about staying superior. To lag behind wasn't just slow, it was strategic death.
So you have Darcy, who's desperate for money, and Fisher, who is desperate for fuel. They meet, they connect over oil, and everything starts to shift.
That's the perfect convergence. Darcy sends his maps and documents to London. Fisher sees the potential and immediately starts calling him a goldmine millionaire.
It just shows that these huge strategic pivots, they're not always rational, planned-out things.
Not at all. It's often crisis creating an opening. Their two separate, very deep frustrations became the foundation for a unified national strategy.
And this is where the velocity imperative, the need for speed, just takes over. This whole transition, it wasn't really about economics. It was driven entirely by the shadow of the German Navy.
That Anglo-German naval arms race is absolutely key here. Kaiser Wilhelm II had this policy, Weltpolitik, this ambition for Germany to be a global superpower.
And for that, you need a navy that can challenge Britain.
You do. And when you have an external threat that big, that formidable, all the internal arguments they stop. Everything boils down to one single question.
If they attack tomorrow, can we win?
That's the one. And that question was staring them right in the face. You can see the psychological shift in Winston Churchill, who was First Lord of the Admiralty.
Right. At first, he was more focused on just modernization. He was a bit wary of a full-on confrontation.
He was. But then the German gunboat incident at Agadir in 1911 happened. That was a wake-up call. It was a classic threat signal.
What happened there?
Germany sent a gunboat to Morocco, challenging French interests, and it brought Britain and France to the brink of war. And for Churchill, that's when war stopped being this, theoretical idea. It became imminent.
It's a powerful lesson. People and nations, we don't really change based on a 5-year plan.
No. We change when there's a real, visceral threat signal that just bypasses all the theory and speaks right to our survival instinct.
And the answer to that threat was speed. The British fleet just had to be faster than the German fleet.
Exactly. They needed their main warships to go from 21 knots up to 25 knots. And that wasn't just a small improvement, it was a tactical game changer. At 25 knots, you dictate the fight.
So why couldn't they just, I don't know, shovel more coal into the engines to get those extra 4 knots?
It's about energy density and logistics. Oil packs way more power for its weight and volume, so the ships could be faster, go further, and this is crucial. You didn't need hundreds of men, these coal stokers, in the belly of the ship.
That was brutal work, right?
Incredibly brutal. Hot, exhausting work that reduced a crew's fighting ability. Oil was cleaner, needed fewer people, and you could refuel much faster. It was really the only way to get that critical speed advantage.
Which leads us to Churchill's famous leap of fate.
A breathtaking decision.
He decides to build a new, fast, oil-powered fleet. He puts the entire backbone of the Navy on a fuel source from halfway across the world, completely unsecured.
It's the definition of calculated risk.
Cheap.
He decided first, the future fleet will run on oil. Then, and only then, does he turn the empire's resources to solving the massive supply problem the decision created.
He broke the #1 rule of logistics.
He did. Never rely on resources you don't control. But he knew that waiting for certainty meant losing the race for speed. The timing was more important than the certainty.
And to secure that supply, the government did something just as radical.
Even more so, in some ways.
The British government, the great champion of the free market, invests £2.2 million to buy a 51% controlling stake in the Anglo-Persian Oil Company.
It's astonishing. They became the majority shareholder in a private company. This wasn't for profit. It was about having veto power. They had to guarantee that in a war, the Navy's oil couldn't be sold to the highest bidder.
The threat just completely changed the government's relationship with private industry.
It redefined it.
And the reason he gave Parliament for all this risk, I think it's the core of our whole deep dive today, Churchill said. Safety lies in diversity, and only in diversity.
And that quote is the perfect place to start our analysis. Let's dig into the 4 big principles of strategic chess we can pull from this. Not just what they did, but why it works.
Okay, let's unpack them. What's the first principle?
Principle 1, the narrow gate of the future. Whenever there's a true technological disruption, coal to oil, or today, AI replacing code, a very brief window of opportunity opens. A narrow gate.
And if you go through it early, you risk failure, like Fisher and the HMS Hannibal.
Exactly. The ridicule, the cost of being wrong, it's huge. But if you wait for it to be safe, for everyone else to do it, you miss the opportunity completely. The gate slams shut.
Churchill saw that the speed advantage was that narrow gate. He had to go through it, even without the supply chain being perfect.
He did. Which brings us to the motivation behind it. Principle 2. The fear of being left behind is stronger than the desire for safety.
I like that. Explain that a bit more.
Well, think about the traditional admirals. They wanted coal. It was safe. It was in Wales. It was predictable. Fisher, on the other hand, had this almost religious belief in velocity.
His fear wasn't about political instability in Persia.
No. His deep fear was being outpaced, of becoming irrelevant. And what you see again and again in history is that it's shaped by people who are terrified of being left behind, not the ones who are just trying to stay safe.
That's a great question for anyone listening. Is your hesitation about real safety, or is it just a fear of having to learn something new?
Precisely. Which leads to principle 3. Power is in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
The moment the Navy committed to oil, war changed. It wasn't just about battleships anymore.
It became about contracts, pipelines, shipping routes.
The whole game shifted.
Mm-hmm.
Oil went from being a simple commodity to a strategic weapon. And that little company in Persia suddenly had the full attention of the British cabinet, the Foreign Office. Everyone.
Because whoever controls your critical resources
Ultimately controls your decisions, whether it's oil or data or capital or a unique skill. If you depend on one single source for something vital, you are vulnerable, period.
Churchill's diversity principle was his answer to that vulnerability.
It was. And that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle. Principle 4, utilizing the enemy to persuade the crowd.
How they actually got the political buy-in for this massive gamble.
Right. Facts are rarely enough in these huge debates. Churchill and Fisher, they needed to rally support, and they did it by using fear. The fear of a monopoly, the fear of a foreign power or a private company controlling Britain's lifeline.
So the ghost of the enemy was a useful tool to get Parliament on board.
It was incredibly effective. Now, some of those risks were very real, but the threat was sometimes, exaggerated to push the vote through. It shows you history isn't just strategy, it's also the art of managing collective emotion.
Okay, this is all fantastic analysis. Let's bring this down to the individual level now. What can we learn from a meeting in a spa and Churchill's big leap for our own lives and careers today?
Absolutely. I think there are a few really actionable lessons here.
First one for me is, don't underestimate small, uncomfortable meetings. Darcy went to that spa to recover from failure, not to find his greatest success. But that chance encounter changed everything.
It's so true. Life rarely pivots on some big, obvious moment. It's usually a subtle turn. That coffee meeting you almost blew off, that quick conversation, no moment is truly small if it changes the map in your head.
It's a great point. What's next?
My big takeaway is lesson 2. Calculated risk is not blind recklessness. Churchill's leap wasn't just a wild gamble. The moment he made the decision, it was followed by intense, methodical discipline.
Forming committees, securing veto power, planning the entire supply chain.
Exactly. He chose the direction first, but then he used absolute rigor to make that direction work. It's the difference between jumping off a cliff and stepping into a boat you plan to build wings on as you row.
But I have to push back on that a little. Churchill had the entire British Empire to back him up. For an individual, decide first, solve later. Isn't that a bit unrealistic without a safety net?
That's a fair point, but it actually brings us right back to Churchill's quote. Safety lies in diversity. For you, the listener, that is your safety net.
So don't rely on one job.
Or one skill set, or one source of meaning. If you build diversity into your own personal portfolio, your income, your skills, your relationships, then when one pillar gets shaky, you don't collapse with it. That's what allows you to take the calculated leap.
That reframes the idea of risk perfectly. Okay, and what about the final lesson? Let's go back to that fear component.
Lesson 3. Interrogate your fears and your narratives. When we feel stuck, it's so easy to blame an external enemy. The market, our boss, the competition.
Anything to avoid looking at our own inaction.
Right. The oil story shows us how collective fear was managed to drive a decision. So when you find yourself delaying a big shift in your own life, you have to ask, is this limitation I see a real objective truth? Or is it just a story I'm telling myself to feel safer?
A comforting story to justify staying put.
Exactly. In the end, the sources all point to one thing. The real fuel, in strategy and in life, it isn't coal or oil. It's the speed of awakening. You don't lose because you lack opportunity. You lose because your awakening to the need for change just comes too late.
And that awakening demands that leap of fate. It's that moment you finally accept that the waves, whether they're waves of opportunity or obsolescence, they are not going to wait for you to feel perfectly prepared.
You have to choose. You can stand on the shore, analyzing every risk until the tide comes in and covers your feet. Or you can step into the boat, accept the calculated risk, and learn how to row in the waves. The story of that spa proves history wasn't changed by oil getting more powerful. It was changed because the mindset of we must accelerate got more powerful. And that's the mindset we all need to find.